Joining us now is investigative journalist Tony Gosling via Skype from London. Many thanks for joining us here on Press TV, sir. Now, there is, as we've just mentioned, optimism being expressed that Greece and its creditors might be able to clinch that last-minute deal. What is Greece giving up, though, in order to do that?
Well, the trouble here is, of course, if they do clinch the deal, all they're doing is kicking the can down the road, effectively. So the deal is just a deal to put things off. But what's playing out in Greece at the moment, I think, is actually fascinating to watch, because you've got the ultimate struggle, really, which is the people versus the banks. Democracy versus a form, actually, of fascism, that is to say, an imposed system. Now, what's been going on in Greece and other parts of southern Europe over the last 3 or 4 years, really actually since the massive and crazy, I think, 2008 bailout of the banks, where the banks really should have just been allowed to collapse, is what the IMF and the European bankers have been doing to African and other third world countries for decades. That is to say, the structural adjustment program of the IMF, where what they do is they say, well, we'll give you a little bit more money to your central bank. That is, if you privatise your infrastructure and give it to us, or sell it to us. And that's exactly what they've been doing with Greece. So it's actually very fitting that this should be taking place in the home of democracy in Greece, because that is exactly what's going on. Ordinary people across Europe are taking on the banksters finally, at last, and the scene is set in Greece for that to take place.
But Mr. Gosling, the creditors, though, would argue that their structural adjustment policies that are being imposed upon Greece in return for this bailout money is to make the Greek economy more competitive and let it grow in the long term to benefit all Greeks and all of the Eurozone.
Well, it's not to benefit Greece. Actually, let's let Greeks decide what benefits Greece, not the creditors. Effectively, Christine Lagarde from the IMF is the kind of loan shark in chief, because that's what's happening here. Money is being given to the Greek government and to the Greek central bank that the IMF and the European Central Bank know that it's going to be almost impossible to pay back. They're having to sell off. If you imagine a sort of family type situation, a family having to do this, selling off all of the family's furniture, all the family's books, and family silver, until there's basically just a family sitting on their own with a few clothes left in the house. And obviously, once you get to that stage, there's going to be no more money paid back. I think also this is about sovereignty, and it's about whether it's the people that loan the money to the government, as we've got here in all over Europe. Obviously, the European Central Bank in the Eurozone, that's what's happening. Even here in Britain, you've got the city and the private banks, the investment banks in Britain, lending money to the British government, and the British government borrowing money on these international markets. It's really about who's in charge, whether it's the governments themselves or those that are lending the money to them, because the people who are lending the money are putting the screws on all over the Western world. And that's effectively what's happening to Greece. So, in a way, I kind of wish that this could all be over with, and that the Germans say, no, we're not going to lend you the money to Greece, and so the Greeks can then go back to the drachma and start actually building up their own economy with their own currency for themselves, rather than having to be beholden to try and pay back loans, which is impossible really for them to pay back. Just look at the figures. It is impossible to pay back these loans in the long term. So the sooner we face that reality and the markets face that reality, the better.
So, Mr. Gosling, you're saying that even if a last-minute bailout deal is clinched right now between Greece and its creditors, it will have to default ultimately somewhere down the line.
That's right. And look at why Greece is in the Eurozone in the first place. If you go back, you'll find that a lot of the figures which were used to convince the Greek government and the Greek people at the time to enter the euro were actually falsified. Some say by Goldman Sachs, who were doing a lot of the advice as to whether that was going to be a good thing to do or not. And that, in a way, they were brought into the Eurozone on a lie. So I think the sooner that Greece retains or regains its sovereignty by having its own currency, as I'd like to see many of the other countries in southern Europe, countries that are having trouble in the Eurozone, they need to decide, are we going to be part of the United States of Europe run by bankers, some would say banksters, or are we going to have our own countries back again where we can actually make our own decisions? I don't think the European project as it was envisaged after World War II, with this kind of united political union and monetary union, is going to work. And it could be that Greece is the first country to send that signal to the rest of Europe. And I think after that happens, you'll see other countries, one by one, will fall away, and the Germans simply will not get their money back.
All right, let's see what the next few days bring for Greece. That's Tony Gosling, investigative journalist, joining us via Skype from London. It's a pleasure talking to you on Press TV.